Welcome to the Explainer. There's a bold new plan for Nigeria's economy, and man is it causing a stir. It all comes down to one thing: taxes. Today, we're diving into a really powerful argument that's calling for a complete overhaul of the whole system. So let's get right into it.
All right, so the big question right off the bat is, with all this chatter about a new tax plan, why all the wahala, all the trouble? Well, the source we're digging into today argues that the panic is, frankly, based on misinformation, because the folks this plan is actually aimed at, probably not who you think.
And here it is. This chart basically gets to the heart of the whole argument. According to the source, these reforms are not for everybody. In fact, they say 97% of Nigerians, anyone making less than 800,000 naira a year, won't be touched by this at all. The entire focus, the whole thing, is on that tiny slice at the top, that 3%.
Okay, so to really get why the author thinks this plan is so critical, we kind of have to rewind the tape. They paint this picture of an old economic model that they say was just fundamentally broken, a system that's been dragging the country down for years.
This slide just lays it all out, crystal clear. You've got two paths. On the left, you have the old way, an economy running on fumes, borrowing money, and selling off natural resources like oil. But on the right, you have the proposed path, an economy built on taxation, the same engine that powers countries like Germany, Britain, and the US.
The source then really breaks down how this, what they call a debt cycle, actually worked. Just imagine this: borrowing money simply to pay government salaries, taking the profits from oil and pouring them into subsidies that, allegedly, never even made it to the poor. And all the while watching as critical infrastructure, like national refineries, was apparently allowed to be sabotaged. The author claims that without anyone being held accountable, this cycle just kept on spinning. Now, here's a term that comes up again and again in the source material: the cabals. The author paints them as these powerful, opportunistic groups who basically hijack the whole system for their own profit, cashing in on subsidies, and allegedly operating without any consequences. And this all boils down to what the source sees as the absolute root of the problem. It wasn't about not knowing what to do, it was about not having the guts to do it. The argument here is that past leaders knew exactly how successful economies are built, but they just didn't have the political will to make it happen in Nigeria.
So, to really drive this point home, the author zooms out. They don't just criticize Nigeria's past, they put it side by side with other African nations to show just how stark the difference really is.
I mean, just look at this chart. It's pretty eye-opening. It shows how much the government actually has to spend per person per year. For Nigeria, it's just $157. Now look over at Kenya, $650. And South Africa, it's over $2,000. It really makes you ask the question the author is posing. Is Nigeria really a rich country?
And when you look at the raw numbers, the story gets even wilder. Kenya, with way fewer people, actually has a bigger national budget. South Africa's is more than 4 times larger. For the author, the reason is just plain simple. Those other countries are building their economies on a solid foundation of taxes, not just on selling resources or piling up debt.
Right. So after laying out the problem and holding Nigeria up against its neighbors, the source presents this tax reform not just as some nice idea, but as the only logical way forward if the country wants to be truly self-sufficient.
But, and this is a big but, the source makes it clear this new path is basically a battlefield. They argue that when you see resistance from elites, from unions, from opposition groups, it isn't just a simple policy disagreement. No, they claim it's a fight to protect the very system that they believe broke the country in the first place.
And this number right here, this is the centerpiece of the whole vision: a $36 billion budget for 2026. But honestly, the most important number on this slide isn't the $36 billion. It's zero, as in zero new borrowing. The entire plan is for it to be funded from the inside out. But here's the reality check. All this new revenue isn't just for shiny new projects. The source is very upfront that a huge chunk of it has to go to paying off the mountains of debt that were left behind by previous governments. It's like paying off a massive credit card bill before you can start saving.
And that makes it really clear that taxes are just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. The source lays out this 3-step plan for what they call a true economy. Step 1, courageous tax reform. Step 2, bring in total transparency with digital government. And Step 3, cut off the subsidies that they argue were hijacked and only ever benefited a select few.
So what's the endgame here?
This brings us to the final part, where the author stops diagnosing the problem and starts painting a vision for what this new economic foundation could actually mean for Nigeria's future, and they frame the whole thing as a question of national courage. The source wraps up with a direct plea for something that's maybe the hardest thing to give: time. The argument is simple. You can't undo decades of damage overnight. To build a totally new foundation, a solid one the future leaders can actually build on, they say, requires patience.
So, there you have it. We've just walked through this really passionate case for a whole new fiscal path for Nigeria. The author's belief is crystal clear. It takes courage, transparency, and taxes to move forward. But they leave us with one final, massive question to chew on. Is 8 years really enough time to right all those wrongs and build a foundation strong enough to last? Now that is the challenge.